Hello, everybody. So I'm feeling really rotten and nauseous. I guess I came back too soon. So I'm gonna have to finish my lecture with an ed puzzle. I'm so sorry, you guys, but I wanted to get this going so we can get started next week on this project. Okay, I think you'll like it, and it feels empowering to do the work of philosophy in action rather than just talking. So let's get to it. And I apologize if there's background noise because my son is refusing to go to school today and he's just munching on Cheetos and doing his little jargon talk. So I apologize if you hear noise. Anyhow, I want to just start over from domain one since we were stopped in the middle of domain two. I'm just going to review really quickly. And what we're going to do is we're going to go through all the domains and kind of explain that. And then I'm going to have you guys just kind of reflect on your own kind of where you're at in your domains. And then for you in your life. And then I'm going to go over the project suggestions to get you guys kind of thinking about what you want to do. So here we go. All right, so remember, life satisfaction is about that emotional well-being and a positive outlook on life. This is somebody that feels a sense of joy in life, has hobbies besides just watching TV or playing on their phone, and finds meaning in those creative things that you do, be that sports or painting or sewing or whatever, and is able to bounce back from like bad grades or losing a job. Like I read yesterday, my son's text about not getting a job that he wanted after being let go from his dream job. And, what's going to make him successful is not giving up. And he's able to find happiness and purpose by just moving forward. So if you can bounce back from those nadirs, those bottoms of those hills and valleys, right? The valley, you can, there's always going to be a hill that follows the valley. Life is a bunch of ups and downs, and just it's the sense of feeling that you're on the right track, right? And it's not about being like ultimately stoked 24/7, right? It's about being resilient, being able to bounce back, being able to keep pushing forward and not give up, even when things are tough, and to have that kind of optimism. And Harvard research shows that people who just savor small moments, like watching squirrels, cutely chase each other up a tree and just enjoy watching that, or, a sunset, or just sticking your toes on a hot day into a cool pool, those little moments, they tend to have a higher life satisfaction because you're able to like be in the moment, enjoy the simple things, and not just be constantly thinking about what you don't have. That kind of stuff really hurts life satisfaction. Comparing yourself to others is the thief of joy. Physical and mental health is the second domain, and this is another foundational one besides money being the foundational domain. Because if you don't have strong mental, physical health, it's really hard for you to do the things that help you be happy, the things you want to do in life, right? To give you purpose or joy. So being free from disease and having the vitality to pursue one's goals. And of course, you can see how financial stability is important for this to be able to have access to healthcare. And this is considered the functional domain because without a body and a mind that work well, it's really hard to do anything else. I'm sure we've all been like I am right now. It's really hard to do your work when you feel like garbage. And so, that, of course, everybody gets sick, but long-term sickness can really affect someone's overall flourishing, of course. If you've ever seen The Princess Bride, there's this scene between two of the villains that are just talking about their health, and one of them says, well, if you don't have your health, you don't have anything. And they're like, yes, yes. Which ironically, they're about to go torture someone and try to kill him, if you've ever seen that. But anyhow, so what does it look like? It's having enough sleep to stay focused in class, having enough to eat, to have all the nutrients and vitamins that you need, to be able to walk to school if you need to be able to go to the store, just being able to just do basic things, being able to feel well enough to do what you want to do, and to not feel so overwhelmed by the things that you get into those kind of anxiety, panic attacks, and you feel like you can't do anything, right? So, and it is a feedback loop, right? So, it's not just about being not sick. It's about having vitality, having energy to do the things you want to do. And of course, as we said, it's a feedback loop. Mental health links to physical health and vice versa. They can affect one another. In fact, walking or regular exercise is one of the key findings from Harvard about being a predictor for mental flourishing, along with physical flourishing, because it's for some reason, regular physical activity really helps with clarifying the mind and keeping your mood up. Even like just gardening, and being in the sunshine and having there's kind of there's happy chemicals actually in the soil that are like an antidepressant naturally, which is why a lot of people have a gardening hobby, because it does. There's multiple things out there that help actually naturally bring you out of feeling down. And walking, even philosophers, many of them have talked about how walking doesn't just help them keep a positive attitude, and it helps them really think clearly, and it helps them like actually come up with their ideas. Kind of like how in the shower, you kind of have a moment to just be in your mind, and it helps you solve problems. You might come up with good ideas and solve problems while you're in there. Same thing with walking. Friedrich Nietzsche, the Prussian Victorian existentialist philosopher, wrote about that, and and there's even another book I think it's called like Hiking with Nietzsche or Walking with Nietzsche, that I read that's really good, about this gentleman in college who was suffering from mental health issues that were very severe. And he was studying Nietzsche, and he decided to follow his advice. And he actually even went to Switzerland to go study, and he went hiking on some of the same paths Nietzsche did, and it really did help him get out of that really dark place he was in. Nietzsche had lots of health problems that kind of made it worse for him and hard for him to have that human flourishing, because he got caught, he contracted a terminal illness. But Immanuel Kant did the same thing. A lot of his ideas came from his regular walks that he did at the same time every day, like clockwork. And even today, a lot of mental health experts say if you're feeling down, go for a walk. It does help. So domain 3 is about having meaning or purpose, feeling like your life has meaning, right? It's the feeling of one's life having a goal, and that goal is something significant to you. And it's like the why of existence, and it helps you kind of have that belief that your life matters. You're contributing to something bigger than yourself. And what it looks like is, like, for example, a student volunteering in an animal shelter because they really care about animal welfare, or practicing an instrument because you really want to create beauty, or starting your own business because you're really passionate about the product or whatever it is. And just that kind of really adds like that deep, deep joy when you feel like what you're doing isn't pointless. And I know that's why some of you have a hard time in high school, because you feel like a lot of it is pointless. But if you can try to rethink about, like, how could this help me fulfill my purpose, and what do I want with my life? Being able to kind of look at those questions and find passion, right? And it could even be finding passion through your work, whatever that is, or it could be hobbies on the side, but you need to feel like you're doing something. That's why even like retirees will be like do a lot of volunteer work, because we all need to feel like we matter, that we're significant, and we're not going to be just erased. We want to be drops in the pond of meaning that create a ripple effect that lasts. And it could be small scale or large scale, right? It could be, it's whatever you decide for yourself gives you meaning and joy. And Harvard has found that people with a strong sense of purpose actually live longer and have lower rates of cardiovascular disease, because it's actually connected to anti-anxiety. It helps you push through the dark stuff if you feel like this is worth it and it has meaning. So it's a huge factor on the other, like the health thing and the joy. They're all connected, right? So the fourth one's character or virtue. And this is the habit of acting in a way that is good for yourself and for others. So they're finding that if you don't act in good character or virtue, you actually are hurting yourself. And Socrates / Plato agreed with this, right? That was his whole Ring of Gyges story we talked about, right? The wise person knows that even if you never get caught doing something naughty, you caught yourself, and it leads to shame. It could lead to, dark feelings about the self. it really hurts you. You know that you're not what you should be. And that shame leads to a very difficult time to have that human flourishing or that happiness, joy, and feeling you have purpose that's important in the world. You belittle yourself, right? And it makes it hard for you to connect with other human beings, which is a huge need we all have. So this is, the moral domain. Of course, this was all semester one, and it focuses on who you are rather than just what you have, right? It's the habit of doing the right thing even when no one's watching. Because remember what Plato said, you're still watching yourself. And you could feel a great joy by doing kind things, very proud of yourself, and you can build that sense of ego and purpose. And what it looks like could be like choosing not to cheat, even though you know you won't get caught, or showing justice by standing up to a bullied peer, right? Organizing a protest about something you care about, helping someone who's handicapped grab the chips at the top lane, the top of the aisle, sorry, to help them at their groceries cart, letting someone sit down in the bus that's, got a cane when you could stand up fine and all the other seats are taken, just little stuff, right? Or practicing just, with yourself about like doing what you're supposed to do instead of procrastinating, all those things, like being an adult, being responsible. It makes you feel good when you shirk out of doing what you know is right. It hurts. Even if you don't think it does, it's unearned playtime, and it makes it not as fun because it's being kind of ruined, So it's focusing on what's called practicalism, right? How to do the right thing, And that was the whole semester one of our class, the ability to choose the middle path between extremes. Like you don't want to be so reckless that you're putting yourself in danger, of course, but you also want to be brave enough to do what's right and not feel like a coward. Because again, that's that negative self-talk that hurts, domain 3, right? And acting virtuously, being kind and honest really, as I said, helps you kind of boost that domain 1 of happiness. And it can also boost the domain of purpose because, that really helps you feel like you matter. Domain 5 is that close social relationships, right? Human flourishing is so important to have somebody. People who isolate themselves, have no friends. The elderly can get very in a dark place. In fact, their semicolon rates are high if they don't have connections because of family passing away and they haven't made new friends. So having at least a couple people that you can rely on that care about you, that's super important. It doesn't have to be a ton of friends, but like at least 2, I think is what they found. So this is the connection domain, right? We are social creatures, just like dogs, that are pack animals. So are we. We cannot flourish in total isolation. So an example of what it looks like is you have at least one 3 a.m. friend, someone you could call in a crisis that would come and help you, right? And feeling seen and understood by parents or mentors or, a partner, and belong to a group where you feel safe, right? We all have this need to feel belonging and feel connection with another soul, right? And this is about depth, not width. As I said, this is not about, having a bunch of shallow friendships. It's about having just, a couple strong ones, right? Having 2 deep, reliable friendships is huge. TikTok followers, does nothing for you. It is maybe a little kick for a moment, but it is not the same thing as those deep relationships, like these 2 pups and the kitty. And Harvard found that the strongest predictor of long-term health and happiness is having that. Being lonely is as dangerous as smoking 15 cigarettes a day to your heart. So one of the projects could totally be about the loneliness epidemic. I have it on there. That's a huge thing, particularly for boys, but for everybody. It's a huge, huge thing. And of course, domain 6 is the financial security, right? Having the resources necessary to sustain all the others, right? To be able to go to the doctor when you're sick, like I got to have because I have my job, right? And I have definitely a 3 o'clock in the morning friend as well as my best friend. I even have a 3 a.m. friend across the country that would fly out in a second for me, and I know that. I don't have a ton of friends, but I have a small handful of meaningful relationships. I have a lot of friendly acquaintances and people I call friends, but like those deep ones that you can call anytime. That's all you really need, to have a successful life. But anyway, So financial security has to do with like not wondering where the next meal's coming from, having a safe place to sleep, having enough money to cover basic needs, and a small buffer for emergencies. So like you're not like a paycheck away from doom. And this is a problem for a lot of the country, right? So if you guys are passionate about this, you could do a project based on this. The domain has a ceiling here. Once, although, right, there's, I forget what it is. It's like 250 to 400,000. It's something like that. It's less than $1 million a year. Once you get past like something like $400,000 a year as income, you don't really get any more happy. You have everything covered. In fact, people that are very, very rich, a lot of them actually report lower quality of life because of that constant comparison game, not knowing if your friends are real, they're just using you for money. It could be a very paranoid, it's very much this kind of, it can get into be a consumerist cycle of doom of trying to fill your heart, the hole in your heart with meaningless crap. And so, that's something that there is this cap of how much money you need, but there's a basement, right? There's a minimum and there's a maximum that really matters. Okay, so once your basic needs are and moderate comforts are met, like you're able to have vacation occasionally, right? You're able to, pursue your life goals reasonably, right? It doesn't really significantly increase if it goes anything above that, as I said. However, below a certain level, poverty makes flourishing nearly impossible. Although there are some very poor, happy people. There is actually a beautiful documentary about the researching about happiness, about this family in India that are very poor, that they're considered the lowest class, the untouchables, and they dig trash for recycling to make money, and they are like the happiest family, and they don't even have a house. But it's about them being thankful and just having a positive outlook that keeps them happy. So, but in America, there's definitely a kind of minimum to be able to get by, and that was like an exception to the rule. And I'm sure they would be even more flourishing if they had financial stability, that family I told you about. And so if you kind of compare them all here, right, if it's missing, in any, like if your happiness is missing, you feel flat or empty. If your health is missing, you feel exhausted or pained. If meaning is missing, you kind of can go into that dark cycle thinking, well, what's the point of all this? If the character's missing, then you feel guilty or untrustworthy. If you're missing relationships, you feel invisible and lonely, and that hurts. They all are interconnected and hurt one another if there's something missing in the Jenga puzzle of a flourishing life. However, if you have it, you feel vibrant and light, you feel capable and strong, you feel driven and significant, you're proud and consistent, you feel supported and loved. So it's that kind of tippy top of human flourishing that if you've ever studied Maslow's hierarchy, that's the same kind of thing with it's a very similar kind of idea. So looking at gender in mind here, because this is something that for our unit that you guys chose, these are some things to think about, right? Like, are women and girls often taught to find satisfaction by making others happy rather than pursuing their own goals? What about men and boys? Are they also having to give up what they want because they have such pressure to provide, right? And how do beauty standards and media affect a person's ability to feel happy with their own life? Be that, whatever you are in the spectrum of gender. If a person is satisfied with their life but is being treated unfairly, is that true flourishing? Do we value happiness of leaders more than the happiness of helpers? Right? Can we be truly happy if we weren't allowed to express our full identity? Or how does unpaid labor like chores and babysitting, often assigned to girls, affect their physical energy and stress levels? Do doctors take the physical pain of women and people of colors rating of pain as seriously as they do others? I just went to, when I went to urgent care on Wednesday morning, when I asked the doctor about the some painkillers that are just for, it's a very specific thing. It's not like an opioid. It's for a very specific, kind of painkiller. He just kind of rolled his eyes and went, all right. And he gave me 6 pills and kind of like laughed it off that I didn't need it. That was very flippant attitude that I did not appreciate. So that is maybe somebody, and it was a male doctor, maybe not understanding my body situation, right? Because what's going on with me is a woman issue. So anyway, how might gender norms even prevent boys or men from seeking help for their mental health, right? That's a bad thing I see with my own dad. Should health include the right to make decisions about one's own body? Whatever that might be. How does poverty, which affects women at higher rates globally, limit access to mental health resources, although women are more likely to seek it than men, right? What about like with the finances? Because like look at this here. This is a chart. This is by race and comparing. Although I hate the word race. There's not race is a fake word, but it's a human construct. But anyhow, not scientifically, there's no such thing. You could look that up. But anyway, just looking at this chart, look at it here. It says, so white non-Hispanic men's earning is set as the dollar. That's kind of like the baseline. Okay, white women make 83 cents a dollar. So that's a 17-cent disparity. And this is from the U.S. Labor and Statistics in the last U.S. Census. So this is really recent data. So women have gone up. It used to be like 77, I think. So we've gone up some. Asian American men actually make more than anybody, $1.15 compared to white men, whereas Asian women make the most of all women at 92 cents. And then, but still, that's 23 cents between the two. Black or African American, because of course not all people of African descent are African Americans in this country, right? So if you can put them all together, men are at 72 cents on average, whereas women are 67. So that's a 5 cents disparity. But look at the difference between all the others. It's a huge disparity that way. Hispanic Latino, even less, 69 cents for men, 58 cents for women, with an 11-cent pay gap between the men and women in that category. Native Americans make the least, 62 cents for men, 55 cents for women, but there's still a disparity between there. So how can these things contribute to, the problems of not being able to access health care for women, right? Or, any of the domains, right? If there's this difference in money, right? Especially expendable income. And that's just America. Think about other parts of the world. My goodness. Domain 3, with meaning and purpose, some questions for us could be like, why is meaningful work often associated with high-paying jobs rather than care work, like raising children or teaching? Why do we, pay entertainers so much money and we pay, daycare workers so little, right? Do girls feel pressure to find their purpose by being a supporter for someone else's dreams? Do men feel the same way, in a different way? I could tell you my mom gave up her whole career for my dad. She had to follow him around as a military wife, and she had to constantly stop and start. She didn't even finish her bachelor's degree till she was, upper 30s maybe, because she had to stop and start, right? And part of that was because of the Vietnam War. It wasn't my dad's fault. He had to go in the military, but he decided to keep it as a career. And so, my mom really didn't get her career until she was in her 50s when she got her certificate in being it's like a mini lawyer, but not being a lawyer. It's a paralegal, excuse me. So she does a lot of the paperwork for the lawyer. It's like having a bachelor's degree in law rather than a master's degree. Anyway, and how does a person's cultural or racial identity shape what they find as meaningful? Or can you have purpose in society? Purpose if society constantly tells you that your identity is a problem. If a woman's purpose is restricted by laws, like not being allowed to go to school, right? That is an issue in different parts of the world, right? This isn't just about America, it's about the whole world. Like think about Malala, right? Can she ever truly flourish? Or people of color, right? Or people different ethnic mixes. Like in Afghanistan, not only are girls forbidden from going to school, but there's actually racism between the two different branches. Major ethnic groups in the country itself. There's the more Asiatic Shia Muslims, and then there's the more Arabic Sunni Muslims, and they are the ones in power. So the Shia Muslim boys might even not be able to afford to go to school because they're considered lower class citizens. If you're interested, there's a really great book called The Kite Runner that talks about that. Very painful, though. I've never cried more in my whole life than I read that book. But anyhow, character and virtue, the questions to be thinking about are some virtues like meekness and patience pushed more on girls, while others like courage and ambition are pushed more on boys, or whatever, right? How does the ethics of care change how we define a virtuous person, right? Ethics of care is a huge thing in this category, like about, what's considered quote unquote women's work. Why can't men do that? There's a great play called A Doll's House that we could maybe watch with this unit and talk about. I think that would be a really good thing to do. That would be totally allowable because that's approved curriculum, and it definitely shows the issue. And it's a Victorian play where the playwright was trying to fight for not just women's rights but men's rights to break societal expectations of this strict norms of the Western European society. And it was so scandalous when it came out in the 1800s that Germany made him change the ending. But it's a really good one. We could watch that and discuss that because that's definitely in here. How do stereotypes about feminine and masculine behavior limit our ability to grow our character? And does a person's standpoint, their own life experiences, change how they define what is good? And with close social relationships, how does the mental load fall disproportionate on women in relationships to remember anniversaries and booking, planning events and doing all that kind of stuff? Are friendships between women treated as less important than romantic relationships with men? I don't know. You guys tell me. How do traditional family structures sometimes limit a person's freedom while providing stability? Right? So, what the family, especially in our economy, right? It feels like we're pushed with these kind of ideals, but then we have to have a two-income family in most cases to be able to stay afloat. I couldn't afford to stay here if we didn't both work. And why is care often seen as a private family duty rather than a shared community responsibility in this country? That's not true in all countries. In Denmark, it's very different. And guess what? They have some of they're like the first or second highest happiness on the human flourishing scale in the whole world. That everybody takes care of everybody, and they have paid maternity leave and paternity leave a whole year. Men get a year off, women get a year off to be with their babies. People leave their babies in their strollers outside of restaurants. No babies are kidnapped. Nobody hurts them. And if something happens, another person will definitely take care of that baby. It's like a community way of seeing each other. And how does intersectionality, that's that kind of overlapping of all our different kinds of attributes and identities that either people place on us or that we hold for ourselves, help us understand why some people have a harder time building safe, supportive social networks? So I know that was a lot, but where do you guys see yourself on these domains after, all this explanation? Let me show you the chart that I was going to have you guys fill out on paper, but I'm going to have you do it on the Ed Puzzle instead. So, oops, let me get rid of those comments. Boop. Okay. So, let me make this a little bigger for you. Boop, boop. All right. So, on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being, super, super duper not happy, to 10 being very, very satisfied with life, how often do you feel happy or satisfied with your life this week? For health, do you feel physically energetic and mentally clear most days? Like when you come to school, right? Do you feel like you have the energy to do everything, or are you exhausted or don't feel good? Do you feel that things you do in your life are worthwhile on a scale of 1 to 10? 1 being the lowest, 10 being the highest. How often do you act according to your values, even when it's hard? Right? Is there someone in your life that you could truly rely on in a crisis? 1 being never have ever had that. 10, absolutely. I have several right now, right? Stability, do you worry about having enough resources to get through the month? I'm not going to read this, you guys. I'm just going to click all answers are correct. I just want this to be for you guys to kind of reflect for yourselves, just so you know that. And do you view any aspect of your identity makes it harder or easier to score high in any of these? Explain if you want to. Don't worry, I'm not going to read it. And even if you said no to the previous question, how might any aspect of one's identity affect any of these, in your opinion? So these are just reflection for you to think about it for yourself, okay? I'm not going to read it. I'm just going to click 100% done, okay, on the Ed Puzzle. I just want you guys to have that kind of thinking, right? Because I want us to be not just thinking about the happiness of others, but our own happiness. That's kind of the whole point of this too. It's for our, okay? All right, now back to the slideshow here. So what are we going to do with all this? So let me show you guys the kind of the project proposal, just to kind of get things started, okay, to get you guys thinking about what you want to do. All right, let me make this bigger as well. Boop. All right, so I will give you a paper copy when I see you guys on Monday, and I'm going to put a digital copy in Google Classroom for you today, but I just want to go over it with you real quick. So read this when you're done with the Ed puzzle. I'm not going to read it to you. That's crazy. But it does have a bunch of possible projects you might like that are under the different domains. And it's going to, each of them are going to have this kind of philosophical focus on top. So the happiness and life satisfaction kind of ideas here, focusing on eudaimonia, right? Remember that means that kind of, satisfaction with life. And versus just the hedonic gap. The hedonic gap is what I was talking about, like just trying to like find these physical pleasures through like highs of like, not just drugs and alcohol kind of stuff, but I mean like the high of like buying a new pair of shoes or, buying a fancy car, just that kind of constantly just chasing that kind of physical bump of happy chemicals, right, in the brain that just doesn't last, just like physical pleasures, So there's a bunch of different ones here. And I separate them between being individual projects if you don't want to work with a group versus a group project, okay? So know that that's kind of how that's going to go. So look at those. And then, so they go by domains. You could see that. The mental and physical, okay? It's kind of through the way that Aristotle separated the body and the soul, the soma and the psyche, okay? Against, there's going to be an individual and a group project. Domain 3, meaning and purpose. That's the telos. Remember that with Aristotle, the kind of final goal. Again, it's just a suggestion, right, of what you could do here. Another one is the, let's see here. Where'd it go? Domain 4, character and virtue. So you've got like, remember Aristotle talked about arete, that kind of moral excellence, as opposed to akrasia, which is moral decrepitude, right? So there's, again, an individual and group project you could look at, okay? And then domain 5 is about close personal friendships, the ancient Greek philosophical term of philia, okay? There's lots of different words for like love. This is friendship, love is philia. Again, individual versus group project, okay? What to consider. And there's also the group project is that loneliness epidemic thing I was talking about. And then the financial and material stability domain. Plato and Xenophon both talked about oikonomia, which was they wrote about the philosophy of like household management and resources needed for human flourishing. Xenophon was a student of Socrates, just like Plato was. They actually both wrote about the Symposium, which was a famous party where they argued about the nature of love, that Plato wrote a version of and Xenophon did, and they're pretty similar. I've read both. And then Xenophon and Plato also wrote about Socrates' trial when he was sentenced to death. And again, but those are our two kind of like primary philosophers for that one. And so again, there's individual and group stuff here. And then any domain, right? You could create an ethical dilemma. That would be a fun one. Or you could have us compete. You could pick any of the domains and come up to either individually or as a group, but no more than 2 people. I think it'd be hard to do a big group on creating an ethical dilemma, and then we could debate it in class. That could be fun. And if you have a better idea than any of these ones, come see me for approval. So please go look at the list, read it, get your brain kind of thinking about what you might want to do. And I will see you on Monday. I'm so sorry. I just had to stay home. I just feel poopy. So anyhow, I'll see you guys Monday. Bye-bye.